What happens when the weakest wolf in the pack becomes the one thing everyone feared? For Alara Thorne, life had always been simple, brutally, suffocatingly simple. She was Omega, the lowest rank in the Silverpine pack, born to serve, born to submit, born to fade into the background while alphas commanded and betas managed and the world turned without ever noticing her existence. Her scent, soft lavender and morning dew, touched with the sweetness of wildflowers, marked her as gentle, harmless, powerless. In a world where strength meant survival and dominance meant respect, Alara had neither. She cleaned the pack house floors. She prepared meals for warriors who never met her eyes. She endured the casual cruelties of higher-ranked wolves who saw her as little more than furniture with a pulse. But when Alpha Ronan Kane stood before the entire pack beneath the full moon and rejected their fated bond in front of 300 witnesses, everything changed. And what happens next? What? No one was prepared for. Not the pack that cast her out, not the parents who had bound her power since birth, and certainly not the ancient prophecy that had been waiting 23 years for this exact moment, for the breaking, for the blood, for the girl who would rise from snow and death to become something the werewolf world hadn't seen in 5 centuries. The lunar ceremony had been planned for months. Every pack within 200 miles sent representatives. The great stone circle at the heart of Silverpine territory blazed with torches, their flames dancing against the October darkness. Alara had known what was coming, had felt the mate bond snap into place 3 weeks earlier when Ronan returned from a territorial dispute, his scent of forest and embers and ozone crashing over her like a physical blow. The bond was supposed to be sacred. The moon goddess herself forged these connections, tying souls together with threads of fate that couldn't be denied or destroyed without consequence. Ronan had felt it too. She'd seen recognition flash in his steel-gray eyes, watched his nostrils flare as he caught her scent across the crowded pack house. For one heartbeat, Alara had dared to hope. Then his expression had shuddered, cold and final as a tomb door closing. Now she stood in the center of the stone circle, traditional white ceremony robes hanging loose on her small frame, while the entire pack watched in breathless silence. Ronan stood across from her, magnificent in his formal leathers, every inch the Alpha King he was destined to become. At 28, he commanded respect through sheer presence, 6'4" of corded muscle and barely restrained power, his dark hair tied back to reveal the sharp angles of a face built for war councils and throne rooms. "The moon goddess has spoken," Elder Mara intoned, her ancient voice carrying across the circle. "The bond is recognized. Alpha Ronan Kane, do you accept your fated mate?" Time stopped. Ronan's scent shifted, steel sharpening, ozone crackling with coming storm. When he spoke, his voice was clear and cold, designed to carry to every witness. "I reject this bond." The words hit like physical blows. Alara actually staggered, one hand flying to her chest where the mate bond writhed and screamed. Around the circle, shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Fated mate rejection was rare, brutal, and carried severe consequences. The moon goddess didn't take kindly to spurning her gifts. "You would reject the goddess's choice?" Elder Mara's voice shook with disbelief. "I would." Ronan's gaze finally met Alara's, and there was nothing in those gray eyes but calculation. "Silverpine needs a strong Luna, an alpha female who can stand beside me, bear powerful heirs, command respect from allied packs. She," his lip curled, "is Omega. She has no wolf strength, no commanding presence, no political value. She would make me weak." Each word was a knife. Alara felt her wolf, that small, quiet presence she'd always sensed deep within, keening in anguish. The bond between them pulsed and twisted, trying desperately to hold, to complete what the goddess had started. "The rejection must be formal," Elder Mara said quietly, her eyes sad. "Speak the words, Alpha." Ronan drew himself up to his full height. "I, Ronan Kane, Alpha of Silverpine Pack, reject you, Alara Thorne, as my fated mate. I sever this bond by my own will and accept whatever consequence the moon goddess deems fit." He paused, then added with devastating precision, "You are not worthy of standing beside an Alpha King." The bond snapped. Alara screamed. It felt like her chest was being torn open, like every nerve ending in her body had been set aflame. The mate bond didn't just break, it shattered, fragments of divine connection ripping through her soul as they tore free. She collapsed to her knees on the cold stone, dimly aware of her father, Beta Marcus Thorn, taking a single step forward, before her mother's hand stopped him. They stood together at the edge of the circle, their faces carefully blank, and said nothing. Did nothing. When Alara could finally breathe again, she looked up to find Ronan already walking away. In his place stood Celine Ashford, the pack's most beautiful and ambitious female warrior, her smile sharp as broken glass. Her scent, cinnamon and iron and blood, swirled through the circle as she stepped close to Ronan, one elegant hand settling possessively on his arm. Much better, Celine purred, loud enough for everyone to hear. An alpha deserves an alpha mate. Ronan didn't disagree. Guards, his voice cracked like a whip. Escort Alara Thorn beyond pack borders. She is no longer Silverpine. She is nothing. 4 warriors moved forward. Wolves she'd grown up with, served meals to, smiled at in hallways. None of them met her eyes as they hauled her to her feet. Her legs barely supported her weight, the agony of the severed bond still screaming through every cell. One guard, Jackson, who'd always been kind, leaned close enough to whisper, "I'm sorry," before they dragged her from the circle. The pack parted before them like water, faces ranging from pity to satisfaction to carefully neutral observation. Alara caught sight of her parents one last time. Her mother, Iris, was crying silent tears. Her father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, but neither of them spoke. Neither of them protested. Neither of them stopped what was happening to their only daughter. They dressed her in thin traveling clothes, not enough for the coming winter night, and gave her nothing else. No food, no water, no weapons, no supplies. The guards walked her to the northern border, where Silverpine territory ended and the wild lands began. Storm clouds gathered overhead, heavy and dark with the promise of the season's first blizzard. "You should head east," Jackson said quietly as they stopped at the boundary line, "toward human lands. It's your only chance." Then they were gone, melting back into the forest, leaving Alara alone as the first snowflakes began to fall. She walked because stopping meant dying. The bond wound throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of rejection and loss. Her wolf had gone silent, that small, distant presence now shuddered and dark, as wounded as Alara herself. The forest closed in around her, ancient pines standing sentinel as the snow fell harder, faster, building from gentle flurries to blinding sheets of white. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time became meaningless as cold seeped into her bones. The thin clothes were worse than useless, and she'd lost feeling in her fingers and toes within the first mile. Alara stumbled through drifts that grew deeper with each step, her lungs burning as she dragged freezing air into her chest. The scent of her own fear hung in the air, lavender turning sour and acrid as hypothermia set in. When she fell the 3rd time, she almost didn't get up. When she fell the 5th time, she couldn't. Alara lay in the snow and felt her body begin to shut down. The bond wound still ached, a final cruel irony, suffering even in death. Through the storm, she glimpsed the dark shape of a structure ahead, a barn maybe, or ruins of some kind. Using the last reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed, Alara crawled. Every inch was agony. Every moment was a choice to keep going or surrender to the cold. She made it inside just as consciousness began to slip. The structure was indeed a barn, abandoned, half-collapsed, but with enough roof remaining to block the worst of the blizzard. Alara dragged herself into the deepest corner, curled into as tight a ball as her failing body would allow, and closed her eyes. "This is it," she thought distantly. "This is how I die, alone, rejected, frozen in the dark." Her last thought before the darkness took her was surprisingly peaceful. At least it's over. But Alara Thorn was wrong. It wasn't over. It was only beginning. She woke to warmth and the overwhelming scent of aged oak, winter snow, pine, and storm, wild and clean and impossibly powerful. For a long moment, Alara couldn't process what she was seeing. Bodies surrounded her, Massive bodies, far too large to be normal wolves, their fur pressed against her from all sides in a living barrier against the cold. She was buried in a pile of wolves, and they had saved her life. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted them as awareness slowly returned, as feeling came back to her fingers and toes in painful prickles. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 enormous wolves, each one easily twice the size of the largest alpha she'd ever seen, formed a protective circle around her shivering form. Their combined body heat had pulled her back from death's edge. As if sensing her consciousness, the wolves began to stir. They moved with coordinated grace, shifting to give her space while maintaining the warmth. Cocoon. The largest one, a male with silver-touched black fur and eyes that gleamed like molten gold, moved to sit directly before her. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, power rolling off him in waves that made her Omega instincts scream to submit. Instead, he lowered his massive head and shifted. The transformation was beautiful and horrifying. Bones flowed like water finding new channels, fur receding to reveal scarred bronze skin, limbs extending and reshaping until a man knelt where the wolf had been. He was older than Ronan, perhaps 35, with silver threading through his black hair and a face marked by combat and command. 3 parallel scars cut across his left cheek. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the weak dawn light filtering through the barn's gaps. "We've been waiting for you," he said, his voice like distant thunder, deep and resonant and carrying absolute authority. That scent of oak and snow and storm intensified, wrapping around Alara like a claim. She stared at him, still too cold and weak to form words. He smiled, a small, knowing expression that transformed his severe features into something almost gentle. "My name is Kirin Stormborn. I am commander of the Ironwood Guard." He gestured to the 9 other wolves who watched with intelligent, patient eyes. "And you, little one, are the answer to a prophecy 500 years in the making." "I don't understand," Alara managed through chattering teeth. "You will." Kirin reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements, and lifted her chin with one scarred finger. His touch was careful, respectful, nothing like the grabbing and hauling she'd endured from Silverpine's guards. The prophecy spoke of a wolf whose power was bound, who would be rejected and cast out, who would die in snow and blood, only to rise as something the world had forgotten. It spoke of the matriarch, the first and last queen of all wolves, the one who would unite or destroy us all. "I'm just Omega," Alara whispered. "No." The word was absolute. "You were made Omega. Your power was bound when you were an infant, hidden and suppressed to keep you safe until the time was right. But rejection breaks all bonds, little queen. Your alpha's cruelty did what nothing else could. It shattered the spell that's held you captive your entire life." As if his words were a key turning in a lock, something inside Alara shifted. The quiet space where her wolf had always lived, small and timid and distant, suddenly blazed with light. Power surged through her like a dam breaking, and for the first time in her life, Alara heard her wolf speak. Finally, the voice purred, ancient and amused and utterly alien in its magnitude. "I thought we'd never be free," Alara gasped, one hand flying to her chest. "What? Your wolf was suppressed as severely as your power," Kirin explained, his golden eyes tracking every micro-expression on her face. "She's been sleeping, locked behind walls of magic and fear. But she's awake now." "More than awake," her wolf corrected, and Alara could feel her stretching within their shared soul, testing limits that no longer existed. "We are matriarch. We are the beginning and the ending. We are what they feared." "I can hear her," Alara breathed. "She's talking to me." "Good." Kirin stood in one fluid motion and offered his hand. "Can you stand? We have much to discuss, and you need food and proper warmth." Alara took his hand. His skin was furnace hot against her frozen fingers, and let him pull her to her feet. The other 9 wolves had shifted as well, revealing 9 warriors in various states of scarred glory. 4 males, 5 females, all carrying themselves with the same deadly confidence as their commander. They wore identical marks, a tree struck by lightning burned into the skin over their hearts. The Ironwood Guard, Kieran said, following her gaze. We are oath-bound to the prophecy, sworn to. Find and protect the matriarch when she rises. We've searched for you for 5 years, ever since the signs began aligning, and last night we felt it. The moment your bonds shattered, we came as fast as we could. His expression darkened. We almost didn't make it in time. One of the female warriors, lean and deadly with close-cropped auburn hair, stepped forward. I'm Vera, second in command. Her scent carried notes of cedar and frost, and I speak for all of us when I say we would have raised that pack to ashes if you'd died. The prophecy was clear, another warrior added, this one a massive male with kind brown eyes. The matriarch would come in blood and snow, cast out by her own, rejected by one who should have worshipped her. Everything that happened to you, it was foretold. Then why didn't you stop it? The words burst from Alara before she could contain them. If you knew, if you've been searching, why let them hurt me? Silence fell heavy as stone. Kieran's jaw tightened. Because the prophecy required it. The binding on your power could only be broken by a fated mate's rejection. We couldn't interfere without risking everything, and for that, his voice dropped, rough with emotion. I am deeply, endlessly sorry. You suffered because we followed prophecy over compassion. Alara didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process that her agony had been necessary, predestined, required by forces beyond anyone's control. Come, Kieran said gently. Let's get you warm and fed, then we'll explain everything. They brought her to a camp hidden deeper in the forest, a clearing protected by wards she could suddenly sense humming against her skin. Tents stood in organized rows around a central fire pit where flames crackled and popped, sending warmth and light into the gray morning. The Ironwood Guard moved with practiced efficiency, building up the fire, bringing furs and food, creating a space of safety that felt more like home than anywhere Alara had ever been. She ate venison stew and fresh bread, drank water so cold it made her teeth ache, and let the warmth seep back into her bones while Kieran began to speak. 500 years ago, he said, settling across the fire from her, werewolves were different. We didn't have the rigid hierarchy we do now. Alpha, Beta, Omega. We had a queen, one wolf chosen by the moon goddess herself, blessed with power beyond measure, who could command any wolf regardless of their rank. She was called the matriarch, and her word was law across all packs, all territories. She united the wolf world, brought peace, protected our kind from human discovery and supernatural threats alike. What happened to her? Alara asked quietly. She was murdered. Kieran's expression was grim. Betrayed by those who wanted power for themselves, who saw her strength as a threat rather than salvation. When she died, she placed a curse, or a blessing, depending on perspective. She declared that the matriarch line would sleep until the wolf world needed her again, until we'd fallen so far into chaos and cruelty that we deserved the reckoning she would bring. Vera picked up the story. For 5 centuries, we've devolved. The strong dominate the weak without check. Omegas are treated as slaves. Packs war over territory and resources. The balance is broken, and the moon goddess weeps for what we've become. The prophecy appeared 300 years ago, Kieran continued, written in the old tongue, found in temples and sacred sites across the world, when winter's first snow falls red with blood, when fated bonds are torn asunder, when the weakest wolf draws final breath, the matriarch will rise from death, born of magic, bound by fear, cast out when her power draws near. She will be moon-blessed and storm-kissed. She will be love-forged and blood-wrought. She will come when all seems lost, and she will make them pay the Aichu cost. The words rang through Alara like bells, resonating with something deep in her newly awakened wolf. That's about me. Every line, Kieran confirmed. You were born during a blood moon, rare magic. Your power was bound in infancy. You were rejected by your fated mate and cast out into the first snow of winter. You nearly died, and we found you. He leaned forward, firelight catching in his golden eyes. You are the matriarch, Alara. You are what the wolf world has been waiting for. Tell them, her wolf urged. Tell them what we feel. I can sense things, Alara said slowly, testing the words. Since I woke up, the wards around this camp, I can feel them like spider silk on my skin, and all of you. She looked around at the guard. Your emotions are like colors in the air. Vera is protective, tinged with worry. That male over there, she pointed to the kind-eyed warrior, is hopeful but cautious. And you, her gaze fixed on Kieran, you're relieved and guilty, and something else I can't name. Reverence, Kieran said quietly. You're sensing reverence. Those are your gifts awakening, Vera explained. Matriarchs are empaths. They can read and influence emotions, sense intentions, feel the bonds between pack members. It's how they maintain unity and justice. You can't hide cruelty from someone who feels every emotion in a room. There's more, another guard added. The massive, kind-eyed male who introduced himself as Thomas. Healing, command, the ability to strip rank from unworthy wolves, to grant or revoke the privilege of transformation. You'll be able to do things no alpha has managed in 500 years. The weight of it crashed over Alara like a physical force. She wasn't just some Omega who got lucky. She was meant to be a queen, a judge, a power that would reshape the entire werewolf world. I don't know how, she whispered. I don't know how to be what you need. You'll learn. Kieran's voice was steady, certain, anchoring her in the storm of revelation. We'll teach you. That's why we're here, to help you master your gifts, to protect you while you grow into your power, to stand beside you when you claim what's rightfully yours. And what is rightfully mine? Everything, Vera said with fierce satisfaction. Every pack, every territory, every wolf who's forgotten what it means to serve the goddess's will. You are justice incarnate, Alara. The prophecy's last lines make that clear. She will come when all seems lost, and she will make them pay the cost. A wave of power washed over Alara then, not external, but rising from within, her wolf pushing against the boundaries of her human skin. Show them, her wolf demanded. Let them see what we are. I think, Alara stood, energy crackling through her limbs. I think my wolf wants out. Kieran rose smoothly. Then let her come. We've waited 5 centuries. We can wait a few more minutes. The transformation took Alara by surprise. She'd seen countless wolves shift. It was usually brutal, bones snapping and reforming in agonizing seconds. But her shift was different. Her bones flowed like water, reshaping without pain, finding new configurations with fluid grace. Fur erupted across her skin, not coarse brown or gray, but silver white touched with moonlight, each strand gleaming like starlight. She grew and grew and grew, her body expanding until she stood taller than any alpha she'd ever seen. When the transformation completed, the clearing fell utterly silent. Alara looked down and saw paws the size of dinner plates. She turned her head and glimpsed a massive body, sleek with muscle and power, glowing faintly in the morning light. She felt strong, not just physically, but in ways she'd never imagined. As if she could command the forest itself, could call the moon from the sky, could make the earth tremble with a single howl. Now they see, her wolf purred with deep satisfaction. Now they understand. Thomas was the first to move. The massive warrior dropped to one knee, head bowed, one fist pressed to his heart. My matriarch, he breathed. One by one, the rest of the Ironwood Guard followed. 10 legendary warriors, each powerful enough to destroy normal alphas, all kneeling in perfect synchronization. Even Kieran bent his knee, though his golden eyes never left her transformed face. She is risen, he intoned, his voice carrying weight of ritual and recognition. The matriarch walks among us once more. The moon goddess be praised. Alara threw back her head and howled. A sound that shook the trees, sent birds exploding from branches, rolled across the forest like thunder. It was joy and rage and power and pain, all woven together in a note that would carry for miles. In the distance, she heard answering howls, wolves sensing something they couldn't name, responding to a call that bypassed conscious thought and touched the ancient instincts buried in every soul. When she shifted back to human, bones flowing, fur receding, sighs compressing, she stood naked in the clearing with tears streaming down her face. Vera immediately wrapped a fur around her shoulders while Alara processed what had just happened, what she'd become. I felt them, she whispered. Every wolf within 10 miles. I could feel their confusion, their fear, their wonder. Is that... will it always? Yes, Kieran said, rising to stand before her. He didn't touch, didn't crowd, just offered his presence as an anchor. Your range will grow as your power develops. Eventually, you'll be able to sense every wolf in the world if you choose, to call them, to command them. I'm not ready for this. No one is ever ready for destiny, Vera said pragmatically, but you'll rise to meet it anyway. That's what queens do. The days turned to weeks as Alara began training in earnest. The Ironwood Guard proved to be patient, thorough teachers, each one contributing their specialty to her education. Kieran taught her combat, how to move in her massive wolf form, how to use her size and strength effectively. Vera worked with her on reading emotional signatures, sorting through the constant input of empathic awareness. Thomas, despite his intimidating size, specialized in healing magic and showed Alara how to channel energy into wounds, speeding recovery and soothing pain. The others each had their roles. Marcus, not her father, a different Marcus with ritual scars and ceremonial knowledge, taught her the old ways, the protocols and traditions that had governed matriarchs for millennia. Soren, quick and clever, instructed her in pack politics and territorial law. Lydia demonstrated how to project command presence, how to make her voice carry authority that couldn't be denied. And through it all, Alara grew, not just in power, but in confidence. The timid Omega who'd scrubbed floors and accepted casual cruelty was transforming into something else, someone who could look warriors in the eye, who could command respect, who could imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. She bonded with each guard member, learned their stories and scars. Vera had been rejected by her pack for being female and wanting to be a warrior. Thomas had lost his entire family to a rogue attack that alpha politics had allowed. Kieran had been searching for the matriarch since he was 20, had devoted 15 years of his life to a prophecy others mocked as fantasy. Why, she asked him one night as they sat together by the fire, the rest of the guard sleeping or on patrol. Why give up everything to chase a legend? His golden eyes reflected firelight as he considered the question. Because I saw what our world had become, the cruelty, the injustice, packs like yours treating wolves like you as disposable. I knew we needed something more, something better. When I found the prophecy and felt it resonate in my soul, he shook his head. I knew it was real. I knew you were real. And I knew that finding you, protecting you, helping you rise, that was the only thing worth doing with my life. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you'd never met. Not pressure, faith. He smiled that rare, gentle smile that transformed his severe features. And now that I've met you, now that I've seen what you're becoming, I have no doubts. You are exactly what the prophecy promised. You are hope itself. Something warm unfurled in Alara's chest, not the agonizing fire of a fated bond, but something quieter and deeper. Choice, she realized. This wasn't destiny forcing connection. This was two people recognizing something real and choosing to honor it. Kieran. I know, he said softly. I feel it too. But there's no rush. We have time. They didn't. The enemy found them on the first day of December, 6 weeks after Alara's rejection and rescue. A scout from Silverpine, a young male, named Peter, who'd always been ambitious, stumbled across their wards and managed to break through before Soren could stop him. He saw Alara in her matriarch form, massive and glowing as she practiced complex maneuvers with Kieran, and his face went sheet white. Peter ran. Should I go after him? Soren appeared at Kieran's shoulder, already halfway shifted. No. Alara surprised herself with the calmness in her voice. Let him tell them. Let Ronan know what he rejected. Let them all know what's coming. Kieran studied her face, then nodded slowly. As you command, my matriarch. The war party arrived 2 days later. 23 wolves led by Ronan himself, with Celine at his right hand. They came ready for battle, expecting to find a rogue Omega barely clinging to life, perhaps protected by a few sympathetic strays. They came arrogant and certain, the scent of ozone and steel and cinnamon blood mixing with anticipation of easy victory. They were not prepared for what awaited them. Alara stood in the center of the clearing, flanked by Kieran and Vera, with the rest of the guard arrayed behind her in perfect formation. She wore simple leather armor that Lydia had commissioned, marked with the symbol of the ancient matriarch line, a moon cradled by wolf jaws. Her hair, always limp and mousy as an omega, now fell in silver-touched waves down her back. Her eyes, once pale blue, had shifted to luminous violet that seemed to glow with inner light. She looked like what she was, a queen. Ronan's war party crashed into the clearing and stopped dead. Confusion rippled through their ranks as they processed what they were seeing. Not a weak omega, but a figure of obvious power, backed by 10 warriors whose size and presence screamed danger. Alara? Ronan's voice carried uncertainty for the first time since she'd known him. His scent spiked with confusion and the acrid tang of fear. "What is this?" "This," Alara said, her voice carrying effortlessly across. "The space is justice, Ronan Kane. This is what you rejected. This is what you threw away because you valued power over destiny." Selene snarled, stepping forward with teeth bared. "You dare speak to an alpha that way, Omega? I am not Omega." Alara let her power rise, let it wash over the assembled wolves like a wave of pure authority. Several of Silverpine's warriors actually whimpered, their wolves responding to something beyond conscious understanding. "I am matriarch. I am the queen your kind has forgotten. I am the end of wolves like you." "Impossible." But Ronan's voice wavered. He could feel it. They all could. The weight of her presence, the reality of power that dwarfed anything they'd ever encountered. "Attack!" Selene screamed, her voice breaking with rage. "She's playing tricks. She's still just—" She shifted mid-sentence, a tawny wolf launching herself at Alara with claws extended and fangs bared. It was a good attack, fast, brutal, perfectly executed. Selene was one of Silverpine's best warriors for good reason. It didn't matter. Alara didn't even shift. She simply caught Selene mid-leap with one hand, her grip closing around the wolf's throat with effortless strength. She held her there, suspended in the air, while Selene thrashed and snarled uselessly. Then, with precise control, Alara released a pulse of pure dominance, that command presence Lydia had taught her to wield like a weapon. Selene's wolf collapsed. Not dead, not unconscious, but utterly, completely dominated. The fight went out of her like air from a punctured bladder, her body going limp in submission to a power her instincts recognized and couldn't resist. Alara set her down, almost gently. "You forgot your place," she said quietly. "Let me remind you." She reached out, not physically, but with that empathic gift she'd been developing, and found the threads of Selene's wolf, the connection between human and animal that gave her strength and status. And she pulled. Selene shifted back to human and screamed, "No, no, what are you—" "I am stripping your wolf," Alara said, her voice carrying to every witness. "You wanted power? You wanted to stand where I should have stood? Then feel what it means to be truly powerless. You are human now, Selene Ashford, forever human. Your wolf is gone." The silence that followed was absolute. In the entire 500-year gap since the last matriarch, no one had seen this. The ability to simply remove a wolf's other half to render them permanently human. It was power beyond imagining, beyond anything the current packs could comprehend. And Alara had wielded it with terrifying ease. "Guards," Kieran said quietly. His voice was calm, but his golden eyes blazed with barely contained violence. "Show them what they face." The Ironwood Guard shifted. They didn't become normal wolves. They became something from legend, from nightmares, from the stories packs told children to make them behave. Dire. Wolves, twice the size of even Alara's matriarch form, with fur that seemed to drink light and eyes that glowed like hot coals. They were the moon goddess's first children, the original guardians, and they hadn't walked the earth in 500 years. Until now. Ronan's war party broke. 23 wolves turned and tried to run, their courage shattered by the sight of 10 dire wolves whose mere presence spoke of death. But they found their path blocked, the guard moving with coordinated precision to herd them back toward the center of the clearing. "Mercy!" Ronan's voice cracked as he dropped to his belly, his alpha pride crumbling in the face of absolute power. "Please, mercy!" Alara walked forward slowly, her boots crunching in the frost-covered ground. The scent of Ronan's fear hung in the air, that forest and ember smell now tainted with ozone and terror. He'd rejected her for being weak. Now he groveled before her, begging for the mercy he'd never shown others. "You cast me out to die," Alara said, standing over him. "You rejected our bond because I wasn't strong enough. You chose ambition over the moon goddess's gift. Tell me, Ronan Cain, why should I show you mercy?" "I was wrong." Tears streaked through the dirt on his face. "I was so wrong. I felt the bond snap. I felt what it did to you, and I did nothing. I let them throw you away like trash. I deserve whatever judgment you give." Alara looked at him for a long moment, feeling his terror, his regret, his desperate hope for survival. Then she looked past him to the 22 other wolves who'd come to attack her. Many were simply following orders. Some had never harmed anyone. A few, she could sense it in their emotional signatures, had actively tried to make life easier for Omegas in Silverpine. This was her first test as matriarch. This moment would define how she ruled, with vengeance or with justice. "I could kill you all," she said, her voice carrying to every wolf in the clearing. "It would be easy. It would be justified. You came here to destroy me, and instead found yourselves facing judgment for decades of cruelty. But killing you would make me no better than the Alphas who've turned our world into a place of fear and pain." She gestured, and Kieran shifted back to human, standing beside her as a symbol of her authority. "Ronan Cain, you will return to Silverpine and gather your entire pack. In 1 week, you will bring them to the old gathering grounds at the base of Storm Peak. Every wolf in your pack will attend, or I will come and drag them there myself. Do you understand?" "Yes," Ronan whispered. "Yes, matriarch. The rest of you, carry a message to your neighboring packs. Tell them the matriarch has risen. Tell them the old ways are returning. Tell them that in 1 month, representatives from every pack within 500 miles will meet me at Storm Peak, and we will discuss the new order. Anyone who refuses the summons refuses the moon. Goddess herself." She let her power flare one more time, just enough to make every wolf drop to their bellies in instinctive submission. "The age of tyranny is over. The age of justice begins now. I am Alara Stormborn." The name came to her in a flash of certainty, claiming Kieran's name as her own through choice, not fate. "Matriarch of all wolves, this is my territory, these are my laws, and anyone who threatens my people will learn exactly why the world feared the first queen." She raised her head and howled, that earth-shaking sound that carried power and promise in equal measure. The Ironwood Guard joined her, 10 dire wolves singing harmony to their queen's command, the sound rolling across the mountains and forests like a declaration of war. When the echo faded, Alara looked at the prostrate wolves and felt satisfaction settle in her bones. "You may go. Tell everyone what you saw here, and pray that when we meet again, you've earned the right to stand in my presence." Ronan and his warriors fled. A week later, Silverpine Pack gathered at Storm Peak, all 300 wolves who'd witnessed Alara's rejection, plus the 50 who'd been away that night. Alara stood before them in full matriarch form, massive and glowing and undeniable, with the Ironwood Guard arrayed behind her as dire wolves whose presence alone spoke of divine favor. And she made them kneel. Every wolf, from the weakest Omega to Ronan himself, bent their necks and acknowledged her authority. She stripped rank from those who'd abused their power. 12 wolves found themselves suddenly Beta or Omega, experiencing firsthand the treatment they'd inflicted on others. She elevated 3 Omegas to Beta status, their service and kindness rewarded with strength they'd never imagined. And she delivered her parents to stand before her. Marcus and Iris Thorne looked small and fragile as they knelt in human form, unable to meet their daughter's eyes. Alara could feel their guilt like a living thing, choking and desperate and decades deep. "You bound my power," Alara said quietly. "When I was an infant, you wrapped my wolf in chains and condemned me to a life of weakness and suffering." "Why?" her mother sobbed. "There was a seer. She came when you were 3 days old. She said you would bring great change, that you would tear down the old order, that wolves would die because of your rise to power. We were afraid. We wanted to protect you," her father added, his voice breaking. "If no one knew what you were, if your power stayed hidden, Maybe you could live a normal life. Maybe you'd be safe. Instead, you made me a target. Alara's voice was hard. You made me weak in a world that destroys the weak. You let me suffer for 23 years because you were afraid of change. We know, Iris whispered. We know what we did. We destroyed our own daughter to save her, and we'll carry that guilt until we die. We don't ask forgiveness, we don't deserve it. Alara looked at them and felt the tangled emotions, love and rage, betrayal and understanding, pain and the distant possibility of healing. You're right. You don't deserve forgiveness. Not yet. She paused, letting the weight of judgment settle. But the moon goddess works in mysterious ways. Your betrayal, as cruel as it was, is what made this moment possible. If my power had never been bound, it couldn't have been broken by rejection. If I hadn't suffered, I wouldn't understand the wolves I meant to protect. She reached out with her empathic gift and found the guilt threads tangling through her parents' souls. I am giving you a path to redemption. You will spend the next year traveling to every pack within our territory. You will tell them what you did. You will confess your fear and your mistake. And you will spread word that the matriarch has risen, and she commands justice for all wolves regardless of rank. Do this faithfully, and perhaps we can find our way. We can aim back to being a family. Marcus and Iris collapsed in relief and renewed sobbing, pressing their foreheads to the frozen ground in gratitude for a mercy they hadn't expected. By the time the sun set on that day, Silverpine Pack had been fundamentally transformed. New laws were declared, carved into stone and enforced by matriarch authority. Omegas would be protected, not exploited. Strength would be measured by character as well as combat ability. Rejection of fated mates would require matriarch approval and carry severe consequences. Any wolf who abused their rank would lose it. Ronan himself, broken and humbled, swore an oath of fealty before 300 witnesses. Alara didn't strip his alpha status. That would have left the pack unstable and leaderless. But she placed him under her direct authority, made it clear that he ruled at her pleasure, and assigned Vera to remain in Silverpine as her representative and his conscience. In the month that followed, packs from across 500 miles sent delegations to Storm Peak. Some came willingly, drawn by prophecy and hope. Others came out of fear, having heard stories of the matriarch who could strip wolves with a thought and commanded dire wolves as guardians. All of them knelt before Alara Stormborn and acknowledged her sovereignty. The world was changing. The age of tyranny was ending. And at the center of it all stood a female who'd been called the weakest Omega, now revealed as the strongest wolf alive. And so Alara's journey from rejected Omega to sovereign queen reached its first milestone. She'd been cast out to die and had risen instead, more powerful than the alpha who'd scorned her, more feared than the villain who'd mocked her, more loved by her found family than she'd ever been by the pack of her birth. She stood at the center of a new world taking shape, with Kieran at her side as her chosen mate, the Ironwood Guard as her unbreakable shield, and the promise of the moon goddess herself singing through her veins. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The matriarch had risen from snow and blood just as foretold. But this was only the beginning. In the distance, darker threats stirred, ancient enemies who remembered the first matriarch and feared the second, rival supernatural forces who saw her rise as a threat to their own power, and somewhere in the shadows, a blood moon rising that would test everything Alara had become. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, the weak had become strong. The rejected had become revered. The wolf who'd been bound had broken free. And the world would never be the same. What happens when the weakest wolf becomes the one thing everyone feared? She becomes exactly what they needed all along. Not a tyrant, not a destroyer, but a queen who remembered what it meant to suffer and chose justice over vengeance. She becomes hope. How far would you go to reclaim your power? How would you judge those who hurt you? And what would you do if destiny chose you for greatness you never imagined? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this journey from Omega to Matriarch. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because Alara's story is just beginning, and the next chapter promises battles, betrayals, and revelations that will shake the werewolf world to its foundations. Thank you for listening to this tale of transformation and triumph. We'll see you in the next chapter when the blood moon rises and ancient enemies emerge from the darkness to test our queen's resolve. Until then, may the moon goddess guide your path